بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. So tonight's lesson we're moving forward in Kitab al-Hajj from the compilation of hadiths of Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, al-Lu'lu wal-Marian. The author, Sheikh Muhammad Fawad Abdul Baqi, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, chapter number 49, باب استحباب تقديم دفع الضعفة من النساء وغيرهن من مزدلفة إلى منى في أواخر الليل قبل زحمة الناس واستحباب المكث لغيرهم حتى يصلوا الصبح بمزدلفة. Chapter 49 says, preference of leaving Muzdalifah for Mina by the weak and aged among women, etc., at the latter part of the night before the moving of the people in multitude, and preference of staying in Mina or preference of staying in Muzdalifah till offering the Fajr prayer by others. That's a lot in English. It's a lot to grasp, to get, to understand. What's meant by this is in continuation on speaking of the things to do during Hajj and the timeline, Dhul Hijjah starting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, etc. What to do during the 9th to the 10th to the 11th to the 12th day, etc. What's necessary, what has to be done, and if it isn't done, the Hajj is invalid. You wasted your money, you wasted your vaccine, whatever, it's done. Khalas, it's ruined. Or that which, if you don't do, you have the opportunity of mending your error and your mistake, fixing it, making it up by going back and doing it, paying an expiation, a sacrificial animal, etc. Thirdly, that which doesn't have to be done, but should be done. It's preferred, it's recommended, it's a sunnah act to do. For all or for some. Sunnah act which is highly recommended for all, Sunnah act which is only recommended for some, in certain circumstances and certain situations. That's what chapter 49 is about. And that is, he says, leaving Muzdalifah to go to Mina, meaning on the night of the what? What day now? When are you leaving Muzdalifah? The night of Nahar or the eve of Nahar? The eve, that's right. After Maghrib, we read the hadith of Usama bin Zayd. The Prophet combined the prayers. Abdullah bin Mas'ud, the Prophet combined the prayers. He made them at a certain time, Maghrib and Isha. And he spent the night where? Muzdalifah. So those who have special conditions, health conditions, weak, sick, old, etc., they have a recommendation, a concession, and an allowance to leave Muzdalifah to travel towards where? Mina, earlier than the rest of the Hajjis. And that is going to be on the eve of the 10th. Now, the night of the 9th. In English, we explained this many years ago. We explained this, English versus Arabic. The eve versus the night. In Arabic, when you say Laylatu, Masa'u, Yomu, Sabahu, it's a bit different than in English. Right? The night of Jumu'ah in Arabic and Islamic sense is when? Thursday night in our language and culture. Thursday night is actually in Arabic what? Laylatul Jumu'ah. The what? Laylatul Jumu'ah, right? Laylatul Jumu'ah, right? But we don't say that. Friday night is when? Friday night. Everybody's off work. They're going out to party, right? That's when?
Friday night.
Not Thursday night. You guys with me or not? I don't think they're with me. So therefore, Jazakallahu khairan. So how do you say in our language the night before? The night before Christmas, right? Or you can also say Eve, which is equivalent in Arabic and Islam to what? هذا هو, as we just explained. So the night of the eve of Laylat of, what's important is Muzdalifah. Instead of spending the night there and waiting to make Fajr, then going to Mina and performing the acts and the deeds of the 10th day, Yawm al-Nahar, Yawm al-Eid, people who have special conditions are allowed to do what? Leave earlier. And they should leave earlier. Those who don't have these special conditions should stay. Leave after the Fajr prayer. Everybody understand this or not? طيب? All right. So that's what chapter 49 is about. And there are many other examples on Hajj in which there are special concessions given or handed to those who have special needs. Those who have special needs, right? But yeah. So the author, before we read Shaykh Nawawi, he says here, Babu istihbabi. It doesn't say wujub. It doesn't say ilzam, but it says the recommendation for those who are called da'afa. Studying the Arabic language, fa'ala. Ulaika humul kafaratul fajara. Naam. Ulaika hum al-kafaratul fajara. Right? Not kafirun, fajirun, not kuffar, fujjar. But what? Kafara. Da'afa. Not da'if, but what? Or du'afa, مثلا. Du'afa, right? Not du'afa, but what? Da'afatu. Al-da'afatu. When we talk about sarf, naam. Al-awzan al-sarfiyya. Al-da'afa. Al-kafara. Al-fasaqa. Wahakadha, right? So those who are da'if, those who are weak, min al-nisa'i wa ghayrihinna, women and other than women. So the question is now, if a woman is making Hajj, can she leave? Should she leave even if she isn't weak, or should she stay and go with the rest of the pack? Now, if a man is weak, should he go and leave, or should he stay because he's a man, etc.? He says, min al-nisa'i wa ghayrihinna, women and what? Other than women. Elderly, those who have injuries, etc. Does this also apply to the chaperones, the company, the guardians, the husbands, wives, and sons of weak women or weak men? I have to accompany my grandfather, but I'm strong as an ox. Am I allowed to go? I don't want men to be brushing up and rubbing up and touching on my wife and pushing my wife. I don't want my wife to get trampled, right? So therefore, because I'm afraid of this, am I allowed to leave early? This can become very messy. And because one of the reasons behind this is that it's so crowded and so many people are allowed on Hajj. And another problem, we've said this before, is that so many women make Hajj over and over again, which isn't necessarily what they should be doing, according to many scholars in Islam. Many scholars of Islam say that once a woman performs Hajj once, khalas, she should not leave her home again and throw herself in that crowd of men a second time. Understand? But what's important is, one of the reasons why there's so much confusion on many of these different fiqh issues and many different fatwa that are given and refutations of those fatwa, you can't leave, you have to stay, you're strong, you're healthy, but because it's your family member, you're allowed to go. a concession of rukhsa is open up widely is because there's just so many people there. And so many things that didn't exist in the time of the Prophet ﷺ are now standard during Hajj during our times. And from that is what? Is this. And anyone who's made Hajj knows this. You know how crowded and chaotic and hectic it is at Muzdalifah. And how crowded and hectic and chaotic it is going to Mina. Walking, the bus, it's literally crazy. Nowhere to sit, nowhere to sleep, nowhere to use the bathroom. People are rushing. And that's when there's so many people, that's what happens. The fatwa wars start. Sheikh Fulan said, I can leave at night. Sheikh Fulan said, you can't leave at night. Sheikh Fulan said, I can accompany my mother. Sheikh Fulan said, no, your mother can go, but what? وهكذا. So there's a problem, a bigger problem. He says here, في أواخر الليل, during the wee hours of the night, the latter part of the night, meaning they went to Muzdalifah, now it's time to move on. قبل زحمة الناس, before the crowd of the people. And those weak people, sick people, or those women, whatever, they're going to be harmed and annoyed by the crowd of men. واستحباب المكث لغيرهم. And others, those who are not weak, those who aren't sick or ill, they should stay. حتى يصلوا الصبح, until the Fajr is what? Offered at Muzdalifah. Then you proceed to Mina and do the acts of the 10th day, Yawm al-Nahar. The first hadith the author mentions, he says, Hadith Aisha رضي الله عنها قالت نزلنا المزدلفة فاستأذنت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم سودة أن تدفع قبل حطمة الناس وكانت امرأة بطيئة فأذن لها فدفعت قبل حطمة الناس وقمنا حتى أصبحنا نحن ثم دفعنا بدفعه فلأن أكون استأذنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كما استأذنت سودة أحب إلي من مفروح. Narrated 812, or in hadith number 812, narrated Aisha, we got down at Muzdalifah and Sauda asked the permission of the Prophet ﷺ to leave. She was a slow-going woman. The Prophet ﷺ gave her permission. So she departed before the rush of the people. We stayed at Al-Muzdalifah till dawn and set out with the Prophet ﷺ. I wish I had taken the permission of Allah's Messenger ﷺ as Sauda had done. That would have been dearer to me than any other happiness. Hadith 813. Hadith Asma radiallahu anha. عن عبد الله مولى أسماء عن أسماء أنها نزلت ليلة جمع عند المزدلفة فقامت تصلي فصلت ساعة ثم قالت يا بني هل غاب القمر؟ قلت لا. فصلت ساعة ثم قالت هل غاب القمر؟ قلت نعم. قالت فارتحلوا فارتحلنا ومضينا حتى رمت الجمرة ثم رجعت فصلت الصبح في منزلها فقلت لها يا هنتا ما أرانا إلا قد غلسنا. قالت يا بني إن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أذن للضعن. Hadith 813 is narrated by Abdullah, the slave of Asma. During the night of Jami', meaning Muzdalifah, Asma got down at Muzdalifah and stood up for prayer. She offered prayer for some time and then asked, "Oh my son, has the moon set?" I replied in the negative, and she again offered the prayer for some more time and then asked, "Has the moon set?" I replied, "Yes." So she said that we should set out. And we departed and went on until she threw the pebbles at the Jamrah. And then she returned to her dwelling place and offered morning prayer. I asked her, "Oh, you think we have come early in the night?" She replied, "Oh, my son, Allah's Messenger ﷺ gave permission to the women to do so." Hadith 814, Hadith Ibn Abbas رضي الله عنهما قال أنا ممن قدم النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ليلة المزدلفة في ضعفة أهله. Narrated Ibn Abbas, I was among those whom the Prophet ﷺ sent out on the night of Muzdalifah, early being among the weak members of his family. Hadith 815, Hadith Ibn Umar رضي الله عنهما قال أو أنه كان يقدم ضعفة أهله فيقفون عند المشعر الحرام بالمزدلفة بليل فيذكرون الله ما بدا لهم ثم يرجعون قبل أن يقف الإمام وقبل أن يدفع فمنهم من يقدم منا لصلاة الفجر ومنهم من يقدم بعد ذلك فإذا قدموا رموا الجمرة وكان ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما يقول أرخص في أولئك رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Narrated Abdullah bin Umar that he used to send the week among his family early to Mina. So they used to depart from Al-Mash'ar al-Haram at Muzdalifah at night and invoke Allah as much as they could. And then they would return before the Imam had started from Muzdalifah to Mina. So some of them would reach Mina at the time of the Fajr prayer, and some of them would come later. When they reached Mina, they would throw pebbles at the Jamrah. Ibn Umar used to say, Allah's Messenger ﷺ gave the permission to them. Gave the permission to them to do so. Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says regarding this chapter, فيه دليل لجواز الدفع من مزدلفة قبل الفجر. قال الشافعي وأصحابه يجوز قبل نصف الليل ويجوز رمي جمرة العقبة بعد نصف الليل واستدلوا بهذا الحديث. واختلف العلماء في مبيت الحاج بالمزدلفة ليلة الفجر أو ليلة النحر. والصحيح من مذهب الشافعي أنه واجب من تركه لازمه دم وصح حجه. وبه قال فقهاء الكوفة وأصحاب الحديث. وقال طائفة هو سنة إن تركه فاتته الفضيلة ولا إثم عليه ولا دم ولا غيره وهو قول الشافعي. وبه قال جماعة وقال طائفة لا يصح حجه ومحكي عن النخع وغيره. وبه قال إمامان كبيران من أصحابنا وهما أبو عبد الرحمن بن بنت الشافعي أبو بكر بن خزيمة. وحكي عن عطاء والأوزاعي أن المبيت بالمزدلفة في هذه الليلة ليس بركن ولا واجب ولا سنة ولا فضيلة فيه بل هو منزل كسائر المنازل بل هو منزل كسائر المنازل إن شاء تركه وإن شاء لم يتركه ولا فضيلة فيه. وهذا قول باطل. اختلفوا في قدر المبيت الواجب فالصحيح أن الشافعي أنه ساعة في النصف الثاني من الليل وفي قول له ساعة من النصف الثاني أو ما بعد إلى طلوع الشمس وفي قول ثالث له أنه معظم الليل. وعن مالك ثلاث روايات إحداها كل الليل والثاني معظمه والثالث أقل زمانا. He says this chapter proves all the hadiths that we just read that are in Bukhari and Muslim and hadiths that are in Sahih Muslim and in different versions, they all prove one thing. He says the permissibility of leaving Muzdalifah before Fajr. One does not have to stay in Muzdalifah until he prays Fajr, but he's allowed to go there for some time, sit there, sleep, take a nap, eat, drink, whatever the case may be, and leave before Salatul Subh, before Fajr. Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah and his students, his disciples, they said it is lawful for him to leave before midnight, before nisf al-layl, before the half of the night goes by. And it's also lawful to stone the jamrah, to stone the Aqaba jamrah after midnight, after half of the night has gone by. And they base this opinion off of these hadiths. So number one, leaving Muzdalifah before Fajr. Number two, stoning the Aqaba jamrah after half the night has passed. And of course, we don't need to say, but what's meant by midnight is not 12 a.m., but the half of the Islamic Arabic night, meaning from Maghrib until Fajr. From Maghrib until Fajr. Moving forward. He then says the scholars of Islam, the fuqaha, the madhabs, the traditional schools of thought, they differ on the ruling of a haji staying the night in Muzdalifah, the eve of An-Nahar. The ninth night going towards the 10th day. They differ on the pilgrim staying at Muzdalifah. So he mentions the different views among the scholars of Islam, the traditional madhabs. View number one is the correct view. It's the standardized view of Imam Shafi'i in the Shafi'i madhab. Meaning is that there are other views and opinions within Shafi'i madhab. Whether Imam Shafi'i said more than one thing at one time, or different disciples argued and differed, and they're Shafi'is. He says the Sahih, the Mu'tamid. Within the madhab there is difference of opinion. Within one madhab there is khilaf. Not like those who shamelessly lie and make it seem that the madhab is 100% totally simple and easy and there's no issues. There's difference of opinion in hadith, difference of opinion in Bukhari, difference of opinion in Fulan, Shokani, Albani, Sanani, Ibn Hazm. You can't take that, it's so confusing. And the madhab is just an idealistic utopia of, that's a kadhib, that's not true. One could spend an entire lifetime studying one madhab and not get to the end of it, with great deals of difference. And if you're going to study a madhab, like anything else that you have to study, you have to crawl before you walk. There are books for beginners, books for intermediates, books for experts, books for those who are advanced experts. وهكذا. Within a madhab, right? You talk about the Hanbali books. Umdatul Fiqh is not like Al-Insaf. Al-Sharh al-Kabir is not like مثلا Al-Iqna' or Kashaf al-Qinna'. It's not like Rod Murbi. It's two different levels. Al-Mughni, Al-Sharh al-Kabir, Al-Muqni, different levels, right? Zad al-Mustaqni, Al-Muqni, they're different what? Levels. Al-Kafi is not like Akhsar al-Mukhtasarat. They're different levels within a madhab. Different levels within a madhab. You have no business as a beginner up there. You have no business as an advanced student being down there. And the same applies to if a person didn't study a madhab. If you didn't study a madhab, whatever your method or technique is of studying, there are levels. That's just that simple. A white belt does not warm up and run laps and stretch with the brown belts. Do they, Ilyas? They don't. Not the warm up is different. Forget what they're learning. They don't warm up together. It's a difference. So knowledge is to be studied and taught in levels. Whatever the style or technique is. Maliki, Hanbali, Hanafi, Ahl Hadith, freestyle, whatever it is, they're what? They're levels. Babies are spoon fed. You don't give a baby a whole big piece of food and it lasts. Levels. So therefore, within the Shafi'i madhab, there is khilaf. Nawawi, may Allah have mercy upon him, he says, huwa, is that the correct Shafi'i stance is that staying at Muzdalifah is mandatory. It's a wajib of Hajj. And the rule is he who leaves off something which is wajib in Hajj has to fix it, how? With a sacrificial animal. Whoever leaves off that which is wajib has to fix it with what? Dam, blood, a sacrificial animal, dhabh, a sheep or a goat. So therefore, if a person doesn't stay at Muzdalifah, he's allowed to mend that error by offering the animal, and his Hajj will be valid. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. That's opinion number one. And not only by Imam Shafi'i, but this opinion was also adopted by the fuqaha of Kufa. The scholars of Kufa, including who? Of course, Nu'man ibn Bashir, or Nu'man ibn Thabit, Afwan, who's who? Abu Hanifa. His disciples, Ibrahim Nakhai, etc. in that city of Iraq. Washabul Hadith. And what? The true scholars of Islam. The people of Hadith, the disciples. Opinion number two is that it's sunnah. You don't have to stay in Muzdalifah. If you want to do it, it's good. And if you don't want to do it, it's fine, but you lose out on reward. No sin, no blood, nothing needs to be fixed. And this was also mentioned once by Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah. And other scholars adopted that view as well. Opinion number three is that Hajj cannot be valid without it. Period. No Muzdalifah, no Hajj. Can't fix it, can't buy this, pay this, khalas. Meaning it will be a rukn, a pillar, something that's mandatory to be done. And this was mentioned from Ibrahim al-Nakhai and others. And two great Shafi'i scholars also adopted that opinion. Abu Abdurrahman ibn bint Shafi'i, the son of the daughter of Shafi'i. And Imam ibn Khuzaymah, also from the Imams of Ahl Hadith. Another view number four, is that which is mentioned from Ata, rahimahullah, And then Al-Awza'i, rahimahullah, is that staying at Muzdalifah has no significance. Period. It isn't a rukn, it isn't wajib, it isn't a fadila, it's nothing special about it. It's nothing more than a place and a location. You rest, you sleep, you relieve yourself, you make wudu, and you move forward. Best. No, he totally rejects this opinion. He vehemently rejects this opinion by saying it's batil, giving no respect to it whatsoever. So those are four main views from among the traditional schools, the traditional ulama, with regards to staying at Muzdalifah. So when you go make Hajj, you want to stay in Muzdalifah. If you can't stay in Muzdalifah, you're sick, it's too crowded, something goes wrong, then comes the value of knowing these opinions. And that which you're going to follow is that which you learned and that which you're convinced with. I learned this, I'm going to stay in Muzdalifah. We have to stay there. I asked the mufti in the tent, the sheikh in the tent, the student of knowledge in the tent. He says, I'm of this madhab, you don't have to stay. You what? You go forward. Talib al-ilm is going to follow that which he studied. Layman Muslim is going to follow that which he studied, or the person that he asked. And he's going to go with that which he feels convinced within his heart. We'll have that. Moving forward. Next question is, how long do you have to stay at Muzdalifah? For those who say that it's rukn or wajib or a virtue, how do you get that virtue? How do you implement that pillar or that wajib? How long do you have to stay in Muzdalifah? No, he says they differ on this as well, meaning the scholars of Islam. يختلفون, they differ on this as well. How long you have to stay. The correct stance in the Shafi'i school, أنه ساعة في النصف الثاني من الليل, is any period of time during the second half of the night. Half of the night has went by, and you decided to stay there for 30 minutes. Or let's say you took it literally an hour, and then you left. Then according to that, you would have implemented of mabit, of staying in Muzdalifah, right? So let's calculate this. So let's say a person, right now, sun sets when? Let's say Hajj is now, nothing in. Sunset is when? 4:30 roughly. Fajr comes in when? 5:30. Hanafi, huh? MashaAllah. Allahu Akbar. The truth revealed, nah? طيب, let's say 5:30. So 4:30 p.m. to 5:30 a.m. Split that in half.
6.5 hours.
What time would that be? Right now, Eastern time.
Like 11.
11 p.m.?
Yeah.
So a person looks at his watch, right? And he says, it's now 11:30 p.m. I'm going to stay from 11:30 to 12 a.m. After 12 a.m., I'm going to leave and I'm going to go to Mina. Understand or not? And the best thing to do, the most recommended thing to do is to do what? Stay until after you pray Fajr. Clear? Moving forward. وفي قول أنه ساعة من النصف الثاني. طيب. أنه ساعة في النصف الثاني من الليل. وفي قول أنه ساعة من النصف الليل. طيب. إلى آخره. Moving forward. Some say all night. Some say most of the night. And some say anything which is linguistically period of time. You understand this? Some say what's meant by mabit is most of it, meaning 3/4. You get it? Everybody with me? It's like moving forward. There are many fawaid here. Linguistical fawaid, which we're not going to explain right now. What's important is that Sauda radiallahu anha, she asked. Aisha didn't ask. For one reason or another, she wanted to remain and stay behind. And then later on, she regretted it, meaning it was too much. It's too crowded, too burdensome, too many men, too many people pushing, pulling. And she says, I wish I would have asked, right? And this goes to show us many things. We won't get into them right now. Move forward. States. طيب خير إن شاء الله. As far as some other fawaid here from these hadiths, first and foremost is the compassion, the mercy, and the tolerance, quote unquote, that's a sticky word, of the Sharia. And that the Sharia does not neglect nor ignore the ranks and levels of people. The Sharia takes into consideration there are men that are strong, women that are strong, and there are men who have ailments and injuries. Broken foot, a twisted ankle, one leg, right? Asthma, whatever the issue may be, the Sharia takes those things into consideration. And not like how people want to make the Sharia to be some type of mean, cruel, harsh, barbaric, medieval, legal code that just off with someone's head and cut off the arm. It's not like that. Okay? That's first and foremost. And those who represent the Sharia, who teach it, who call to it, who give fatwas based off of it, their fatwa should fall under this light always. Mercy, kindness, and being mindful of people. As the Prophet ﷺ said, that أَمَّا أَحَدُكُمُ النَّاسِ, when you're the imam, you lead the people in prayer, فَلْيُخَفِّفْ, make the prayer easy. Don't make it too long, too heavy. Because those who stand behind you, all of them aren't strong. There are those who are weak, those who are sick, and those dhal hajj, those who need things. I have to tend to my camels. I love to pray, I love Allah, but at the same time, I have to pay bills. I need to go to sleep early. I have an issue going to the bathroom. I have to change this, I have to fix this. So this is something to be mindful of. An imam, a talib ilm, a scholar, a mufti, be mindful of being merciful and not becoming a punishment upon the people. You're not sent as a punishment, but you're supposed to be sent as a mercy. As Allah said about the Prophet ﷺ, and we have not sent you, O Muhammad, illa, except as a what? Rahmatan for all creation. A mercy for all of creation. Another fact that we take from this hadith is the permissibility, or it's not, the Prophet isn't saying this, Aisha's saying this, mentioning and saying something about someone which may not be the most pleasant thing. But the Prophet isn't confirming it here. Telling or saying the story, talking about someone, not to backbite them, but just telling them how it is. We're waiting for Fulan. Fulan's very slow. Or we got lost because Fulan is very whatever. Or Khalid is absent-minded. It's always losing this, leaving this. Oh, shoot. Oh, man, subhanAllah, I left my thing. Can we go back? Can we turn back? Whack of it, right? Clumsy. He lost his wallet. We had to make tawaf again because he what? He dropped his fanny pack. His knapsack. Whack of it, huh? Khayran, inshallah. All right. And this is a very interesting part of hadith number 813. They translate it as slave of Asma. And the word mawla in Arabic is a very interesting term. Extremely interesting term. From so many different aspects. The word mawla can mean polar opposites. Oxymoron, right? Mawla can mean master. The supreme master. And mawla can also mean a slave. And mawla can also mean a free slave, an ex-slave, someone who's manumitted, right? Now, we don't want to go too deep right now and down the rabbit hole talking about slavery in and outside of Islam. That's a long discussion. Wallahi, extremely long. But one thing which is worthy of mention is that the concept of slavery in and outside of Islam is very different than what many people promote and what people talk about in books and movies. And oftentimes, this is a fact, inside of Islam and outside of Islam, not all but many, a slave was nothing more than an extended family member. It was an extended family member. This person was considered a part of the family. He's not related to us by blood, whatever the case may be, but we lived in the same house, we ate the same meal, and it's an established fact that many planters in the United States, in the South, during the antebellum, before and after period, they worked in the fields with their slaves. All of them didn't just sit in a big house drinking tea on the porch, but many of them actually toiled and labored in the fields with their slaves. And many of them had relationships. They had bonds with their slaves. And if the slave became ill or was harmed or someone did something, they would take a great offense to it because the slave was considered to be an extension to the family. Okay? The little girl, the daughter of the master, may have loved the mammy more than her actual mother. Was breastfed, was raised, was taught, was fed by the mother, the slave woman in the house, more than the actual mother. That's a fact. Or an uncle, more than the actual blood uncle. And we talk about overseas in the Middle East and other lands of the Middle East, a slave, even when they were manumitted, they remained with the family. Because they didn't want to go, they didn't want to leave because that's my family. That's all I have, that's all I know, let alone the fact they're like family. So Asma, she had a mawla, he was freed, and she called him what? Her son. She didn't call him a derogatory name, a derogatory term, you slave, you servant, but you're like my son. So the point is that it's very interesting in Islam when we talk about inheritance, the rules of inheritance, and how when a slave is manumitted, those who manumit the slave inherit from that slave, and how the slave is attributed to that tribe, right? And the concept of last names. It's a very long discussion. What's important is that, like anything else in history, there's actual history, and then there is his story. You have people who make things up about slavery, people who exaggerate things, people who hide information. And then you have those who go extreme and uglifying a thing. And then there are a few people who actually tell it as it was. Understand? That's the point. That's noteworthy, especially when a person encounters someone who's levying attacks against Islam via slavery, right? And oftentimes, many people who talk about Islam and the Islamic system of slavery, Arabs, African slaves, Persians, whatever the case may be, a concubine, etc., they themselves, they don't even know about slavery from their own countries and religions and backgrounds. Okay, we talk about serfdom in Russia. And the list goes on. Many things that people don't even teach in school about slavery. So if you want to debate about Islam and talk about Islam and have an academic challenge about Islam and slavery, you got to know what you're talking about. Okay? And most people, I would say, Wallahu alam, from what I've come across, when they talk about slavery in and outside of Islam, they either don't know what they're talking about 100%, they hide information, or they're apologetic and they're scared. All right? And that's unnecessary. Allah surely knows best. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam wa baraka ala abdihi wa rasuli nabiyina wa imamina Muhammad.